Hello and welcome everybody to our fifth career panel within our Meet EU activities. My name is Markus Thiel. I'm associate professor at Florida International University, focusing on the European Union as well as global governance, and I also direct FiU's Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. As part of a European Union grant called Getting to Know Europe, and more specifically Meet EU, as you can see here, that we at FiU received together with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the University of Pittsburgh, we are holding regular career panels for the past 2 years, 2 per semester, with alums, European diplomats, CEOs, business chamber representatives, and other nonprofit leaders. And focusing here on various career paths towards Europe and the skill needed for those. But sometimes it's not as easy to get a position in Europe or a work permit to work in Europe. So we figured out, we assemble a panel of Washington D.C. based experts to help us explore European focused or EU focused career opportunities in Washington D.C. stateside. And so I'm very happy to present you here with 3 wonderful experts that I will introduce in a minute. But before we begin, I want to thank the European Commission as well as the EU delegation in Washington, D.C. for funding our outreach activities. Also, I want to thank our collaborative partners from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as well as the University of Pittsburgh, and the US Jean Monnet Network for their good collaboration. I would be remiss to thank my Associate Director, Madame Christine Kali, as well as the School of International Public Affairs at FiU and FiU's Career Development team. A special thanks, however, goes to our 3 panelists here today. Amber Cassady from Lewis-Burke Associates consultancy firm, Eric Feldman, and Alastair Hamilton. Both are associate directors of FiU in Washington and the University of Pittsburgh's Washington Center, respectively. We and our students appreciate really your time and expertise over the next 1 hour, 50 minutes. Now, as far as the agenda goes, for the next 75 minutes, we asked each panelist to detail a little bit about their position and their career, what opportunities exist for students and young professionals for a European or EU-focused career in Washington, and what they may recommend in preparation for such a career step. After the presentation, there'll be about 25 to 30 minutes time for question answers from you. And we all welcome your questions through the Q&A box that you see on the bottom of your screen. One final favor to ask you, please, at the end, fill out our short evaluation survey that we post per link in the chat box as well. Thank you. For now, I want to welcome my 3 panelists. And so I want to start out with Ms. Amber Cassady. Ms. Cassady she advises Lewis-Burke's clients on a range of research areas, including the Department of Defense, health, biomedical research, global health, and international affairs. Therefore, she analyzes legislation and policy trends to keep clients on the forefront of arising opportunities. Amber specializes also in faculty engagement and planning strategic outreach in DC. Prior to joining Lewis-Burke Consultancy, Amber worked as a research assistant at the Bertelsmann Foundation, a transatlantic US-German think tank, where she covered US-EU policies on artificial intelligence, technology, manufacturing, and the future of work. She also, interestingly, interned with the Department of State at the US Embassy in Lisbon, Portugal, and gained international diplomatic experience in the embassy's political and economic sanctions. She worked also as an outreach assistant at the Center for European Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She received her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Chapel Hill in global studies, European studies, and an MA in political science. With no further ado, thank you very much, Ms. Cassady, for being here, and the floor for the next 10 to 12 minutes is all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcus. And I think I have a slide that'll be showing shortly. And the slide will definitely showcase why I chose a career in politics and not computer design or anything like that, which I already made a joke to my panelists about that. And basically what I'll be doing is going through my career path, especially focused on what I did in Europe or concerning European politics. And then the stars of the show are really my two panelists that'll tell you more of the tangible resources or the tangible things that you can do to get a job in DC or Europe or something related to that. And so what I'm really going to do here is, after Markus's great introduction and kind of my background, take you through my background once more, a little more in detail, and just show that there are endless roadmaps to a career in politics, and whether that be EU-focused politics or international politics. A lot of what I did kind of led me to being in DC and working for a government relations firm that mostly focuses with research universities, but we still touch international collaboration in universities. And so with that, if we can do the first click. And so as Markus mentioned, I started my career at UNC Chapel Hill. I was an undergraduate student, and one of my majors was Contemporary European Studies. So I got to know the center at UNC very, very well, a lot of great advisors there. And I actually worked as a research assistant my senior year at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was creating toolkits called Teaching the EU Toolkits for K-12 educators to help teach students about the EU. So that was really my first taste of not just studying Europe and European politics, but really putting to work, okay, the EU exists, but not everyone knows about it. How do we teach younger students about it? And so that was a really great experience. And so through my undergrad career, I started learning about a lot more opportunities. And one of them, which is the next click, I was able to go on a study tour to Brussels. I believe that was funded by the Jean Monnet Center. And so I went for a full week, and we went to a ton of different meetings around Brussels, had great exposure, notably went to the US mission to the EU. And so got to speak to diplomats and really understand what's it like being a diplomat, but not only to, usually when you think of diplomats, you think of one specific country. And I was very intrigued about how this mission really worked with all of the EU and not just, one prime minister or one foreign government. And so that was a really great experience for me. And it was afforded to me by UNC and the great network they have here, as you can see through this panel. And that was also my first taste of really the Foreign Service, the Department of State, visiting the US mission of the EU and seeing, oh, this is a career path that I think I'm interested in. That kind of led me to the next step. So with the next click, I decided to pursue a degree in European politics. At UNC, it's known as TAM, the Transatlantic Master's Degree. So it's essentially a master's in political science, but with a focus on either transatlantic studies or European governance. And so this was a 2-year program I did at UNC Chapel Hill. 1 year was actually spent at Chapel Hill doing a lot of the basic courses, learning stats, still taking European politics courses. But then the second year was actually somewhere in Europe. I think there were at least 10 different locations we could have chosen from. And I was able to study at Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona. And one unique thing about working in politics is I actually went to half the amount of classes I thought I would, because this was in 2017. So Barcelona was actually busy seceding or attempting to secede from Spain. So I actually had about half of my semester canceled because all of my political science professors were boots on the ground trying to vote. They were leading the referendum. Of course, we all know how that ultimately turned out, but it was a really incredible experience, not just for my studies, but also actually experiencing such a, I don't want to use the word insane, but such a monumental experience for Spain. So that was really cool. I very much enjoyed that. And since it was a 2-year program and I had gone on that Brussels tour and learned a little bit about the US mission of the EU and things like that, I was really interested in interning for the State Department. So I started the arduous task for applying for an internship at the State Department. And so if it's arduous just applying for an internship, I can't imagine actually going through a foreign service exam or trying to work for the State Department beyond that. But I was lucky enough to receive an internship at the US Embassy in Lisbon, Portugal. And so that was another incredible experience. I worked at the politics and economics section. That was right after the presidential election of 2016. So I was actually there when we received a new ambassador that was appointed by President Trump at the time. And so that also was a great experience. And I think I forgot to say click for that. I believe I have a picture, although it's not too great. It is on a beautiful hilltop in Lisbon, so I did get to see the view every day, but I was mostly at my desk writing cables about Portuguese news. And one cool thing that I'll also mention with this transatlantic master's experience and working at the embassy in Lisbon, I was lucky enough to receive the Foreign Language Area Studies scholarship. So for those of you that are also interested in languages, this FLAS, as they call it, this was a scholarship specifically to study what the State Department has deemed, I guess, critically important languages, and Portuguese was one of them. So I actually was able to receive a scholarship to go to graduate school, and also a summer scholarship to live in Lisbon. And so while I was working at the State Department, I was also able to take language classes, all afforded to me by that scholarship. So I would definitely recommend checking out the Foreign Language Area Studies Scholarship if you're interested in learning these critical languages. And I think with that, next click. So a lot of what all of these experiences have come down to me is it all really depends on networking and casting a wide net. And so during what I outlined over the last, I would say, 4 years of graduating from UNC, the study tour, graduate school, the embassy, every time I came to DC or came back home to the States, I would ask my advisors at the Center for European Studies at Chapel Hill, who's in DC that I can meet with? Because I really wanted to move to DC after I graduated. That was a goal of mine. And luckily we had so many alumni. So I would definitely encourage you all to reach out to alumni from your program. They're great resources. And someone that I had met for coffee about a year before emailed me while I was still studying in Barcelona. And he said, do you know anyone that's interested in an internship at the Bertelsmann Foundation? I'm looking for someone, haven't had much luck with applications. Are there any names you have? And I was like, I'm a name, I'm interested. And so that really got me I moved from Barcelona to DC to take on this part-time internship while I looked for a full-time job in DC. And so that research assistant position really focused on, of course, US EU policy, but specifically manufacturing, future of work, and the future of technology, which led me to my final picture here, if we want to click, as a government relations associate at Lewis-Burke. And so a lot of what I do now is consult on research policy and collaborations. And so while right now I'm not squarely in the European politics focus, we still work with universities all across the US that, as you can imagine, a lot of research can't happen without that international piece and people across the countries working on these amazing scientific articles and journals. So with that, next slide. And so a little bit about what I do now. And so as I mentioned, I work for a government relations firm here in DC. That's just a fancy way to say that we are lobbyists and consultants for research organizations. And so we do a lot of federal relations activities that really help shape the future of research at these universities or associations. So a lot of what we do that may be relevant to you all is we work with USAID, we work with the State Department, and then we also work with other government agencies like the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, even the Department of Defense, and work with faculty at all of these universities, as well as members of these research organizations, help them figure out how to find funding, who's interested in their research, and also what is the international aspect to their collaboration. And so we do a whole range of advising. You can see here, it's listed quite extensively of the different expertise we have. As far as science and technology and innovation and industry, that's where I've done the most international work here at my position, just because with science and technology and innovation, it really does take an entire global network. We're following that. The UK, they just created their own DARPA, which is the defense, kind of their big defense advanced research projects agency trying to make game-changing research. And so while a lot of my federal policy is focused here in the States, I keep saying international research cannot be discounted in the importance to our faculty. So I think I'm at time, and so I'll end my presentation and look forward to question and answers. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit about my path.
Great, thank you so much. yeah, I have some questions, but you know, I keep those as a reserve for later because our students come first. But anyway, now let's move on to our second candidate and our second expert, I should say, and that is Mr. Eric Feldman. He is the Associate Director of FiU in Washington, D.C. So we have, from what I've seen, at least virtually, we have a fairly nice campus presence in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure he can say more about this. Mr. Feldman leads the Talent Lab, which trains the FiU community on the workings of the federal government there and policymaking. It includes fly-in seminars, maybe you can say a little bit more about this later, internships, and the so-called impact series of events where he focuses on communication skills, emerging technology use, and global learning, all of which are essential for a career in Washington, D.C. For 8 years prior to this, Mr. Feldman managed our FiU's signature student program associated with FiU's Global Learning for Global Citizenship initiative, a really fantastic program, by the way. And that included programs and certificates such as the Global Learning Medallion, the Tuesday New York Times roundtables, and Peace Corps preparations. Mr. Feldman has supported DC and Miami-based nonprofit organizations in an advisory capacity, including Pay Our Interns, very important, which advocates for paid internships, the Electo Foundation, a service to inform voters, and the CWS Miami Immigrant and Refugee Program. Mr. Feldman also published on topics related to higher education, including on law enforcement on campus, publicly engaged scholarship, democratic deliberation, and social media. And as such, it's my pleasure to introduce FiU's own Eric Feldman. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Thiel, and it's a pleasure to go after Amber, who works 2 buildings away from me. I'm looking out the window behind her the entire time and seeing the street that I walk down every day to get to the metro to go home. And we'll be reaching out to make sure that FiU students get some internships at her firm. I'm going to speak generally to all of the students who might not be from FiU at first about this, but I do have one slide at the end about the Talent Lab and FiU opportunities as well. So I'll satisfy that request. So I'll dig into some Europe-specific examples and components in a moment, but when it comes to finding any internship, including Europe-specific ones, I want to give some advice about finding great opportunities. So, of course, all of you who are current university students are hopefully using your university's Career Center, whether that's the Handshake platform or anything else at your university. And you're probably also using third-party sites like Indeed, looking for open postings. This makes a lot of sense. You should keep doing this, but I would advise, in addition to searching for actual internship postings that are open to apply for right now, you add to that routine finding all of the organizations that are relevant to your interest, regardless of if they have an internship post on one of these sites right now. Proactively going on those websites, seeing if they have information about whether they have internships. Perhaps they mention what time of year they open, even if they're not on those active posting sites now, and be proactive about networking with people at those organizations. I'll give advice about all of this on the next slides. We can proceed. So we can go ahead and get all of these up at once is fine. I want to share why DC is an ideal city for doing an international affairs, including related to Europe field, but also help you understand the types of organizations that are here at which you could intern. Starting with the federal government first. The reason to intern in DC is because, unlike any other city, this is where the policy decisions that are made that affect every domestic and international issue. The types of internships I'm going to discuss on this slide really do not exist in the same quantity in any other city in the US. So let's say you want to work for the federal government itself making those policies. There's a legislative branch where, of course, you could work for any individual member of Congress, but there are committees. There is the House subcommittee that deals with Europe, for example. There are also caucuses. Caucuses are sort of the student clubs of members of Congress that care about the same thing. So we have, the EU caucus, for example. Or let's say you're not into the politics of, members of Congress and elected officials, but you want to work for a federal agency that implements these international affairs. So we have the State Department, the U.S. Agency for International Development. Those two are kind of obvious, straightforward ones for global affairs, but really any federal agency has opportunities in global affairs, and it's important to not just think about these really obvious ones. So The reason I have the Federal Trade Commission / Department of Justice on here is while I was researching this presentation, I saw that those two agencies were collaborating directly with the European Union government on some issues related to trade enforcement. The United States Department of Agriculture, what does that have to do with international affairs? They have their own foreign service with agricultural officers in US embassies around the world, including Europe, that deal with food security and trade related to food. Now, let's say you want to influence what the government does. Maybe you're like, the government making decisions is great, but I'd rather be on the outside representing industry or a cause and helping the government come to the right conclusion here. This is what Amber Organizations is involved with in terms of lobbying and advocacy. So there are some that deal with global issues like the US Global Leadership Coalition. They do advocacy on foreign policy issues, or you could work for a company. I just pull out a fun example because I like Lego, but really any European company that has a US presence, is probably going to have a governmental affairs person in DC dealing with their US government concerns, which Lego does, by the way, I looked it up. If you're more of the research oriented, where you're like, I don't really want to deal with, I want to deal with the politics and decision making even less, but I love the research and the thinking behind these issues, then you might want to work for a think tank. The German Marshall Fund of this list, I have a little more examples soon, is really well known for transatlantic issues, but the other think tanks like the Wilson Center, CSIS, AFPC will deal with the entire world, including Europe as well. Or maybe you're the type of person who wants to deal with bringing people together and cultural exchange and citizen-to-citizen diplomacy. So there are great examples about this too. So feel free to take a screenshot, by the way, if you're on this, of both this and the next slide. So I'll give a second for that. But it's not just about knowing what these lists of organizations are. It's about knowing the types of organizations that are in Washington. And if you could put some deep thinking and research into the type of work you want to be doing, you can narrow in on the type of organization that would be best for you and do your own research on what organizations fit that bill. Next slide, please. I'll also invite participants to take a screenshot of this list. I am actually very anti-list when it comes to doing internship research, and think it is really about going out and figuring out through your own online research what the best organizations are for you. But of course, I had to have a list of some organizations here. I heard the Bertelsmann Foundation referred to from our previous panelist as well. So that was a neat coincidence. The ones in bold at the top are, the most US, Europe, transatlantic specific, and the ones that are less bold are ones that deal with the entire world, but certainly include Europe. So if you take a screenshot of this and look into them, I verified they all do have internships before I put it on the slide, but wanted to just give you some examples. So we'll move on to the next slide from there. On the topic of networking, because knowing where you want to apply for one thing, but you can do more than just submit your application. LinkedIn is a powerful tool that I love and use for hours every day, where you can not only follow interesting people and actually connect with them. Now, I think the time to do this is actually not necessarily at the same time you're applying, because if you reach out to someone and you're just saying, look, I've applied for this, can you help? And they don't know who you are and they don't have really a way of helping. But if you reach out to folks who are doing work that you're interested in and you want to learn about their careers, like we learned about Amber's career and get career advice and to learn about tips for getting into the organization, people tend to be very willing to help with that. This screenshot is actually of me doing this for Asia, but it'll work with Europe, it'll work with communications, it'll work with health equity, whatever topic you're interested in. You can type it into the search bar there, and you can use filters to find people that are either in the city that you want or went to your school. I don't think they have to have gone to your school to connect with them, but even with me typing in the word Asia, putting Washington, D.C. as a city and FiU alumni, I'm finding people here who have interned at the consulting firm that was co-founded by Madeleine Albright. I'm seeing somebody who has worked for the American Red Cross Asia Division, and I'm seeing somebody that works for the International Finance Corporation. And that's just one quick snapshot. You can use LinkedIn like this, use these search filters and terms to connect with folks. Next slide. Now, once you do that, what is the end goal there, and what are the ways to do it? So first and foremost, I don't think there's anyone that should be too important to reach out to. So you're not going to go for all CEOs or all vice president level people. You should really go more about what they do versus their level. But anyone that you want to connect with, as long as you're respectful in reaching out and you give them options of timing and format, and you're not presumptive that they will, but you're asking very humbly, I say go for it. In addition to LinkedIn, I mean, you can email folks as well. It is often not that difficult to find email addresses on staff pages of different organizations. And when you reach out to them, again, focus on the connections you have. If you went to the same school, if you have any connections in common, make that connection with them. Again, focus not on just that you're applying to their organization, but what your overall experience and interests are. I think there's one more part to this slide. Once you have that meeting, be really strategic about that as well. A lot of people approach this sort of thing telling someone, hey, I just want to pick your brain. But I think people get a little tired of hearing that, and it also really doesn't give them a specific framework of what to help you with. So what you should be focused on is getting their insights about your specific topics that you're interested in. What should you be reading? Who should you be following? What organization should you know about? You do make your broader career interests known. So you're not just saying, hey, I want this one internship at your organization, but you're telling them I want to do this sort of work. And that helps them know what other organizations might also be relevant, what other positions at their organization, and also get to know their own experiences and accomplishments. In addition to making them feel good, you can get some lessons gleaned from that. But I think the ultimate goal here is to impress them, because when you meet someone brand new and you ask for help getting a job, they don't know you well enough to help you. But if you don't focus all about that job you want, but you're telling them why you care about Europe, why you care about the specific issue within Europe, you show them you're a content expert. When they hear about a job open within their network later, they'll probably either come back to you, or if you reach out to them later, they'll be willing to help because you've impressed them. Next slide, please. This is not a resume or cover letter workshop, and there are entire hour-long workshops on that. But of course, applying with good materials is very important to getting the internship. So I wanted to emphasize that this is an important part of it as well, and give some very top-level things on the cover letter. It is very common to see people stating basically the exact same information that's already on the resume, just in narrative format. I went here, I studied this, I worked here, I did that. And so rather than being redundant, consider telling the story that can't be told on your resume about why you care about these topics. The same sort of stuff that we kind of said in the networking. And while even resumes should be tailored, cover letters should be tailored even more, not just mentioning the name of the organization, but also showing that you know what that organization does, saying how you've used the research in your work or how you follow them. On a resume, don't just type the things that you do, but focus on accomplishments, even using numbers when possible. Don't diminish your role in the work, meaning a lot of resumes I see say, well, I assisted the vice president in doing this, I assisted the director in doing this. While you assisted these other people, you were actually doing things that assisted them to center what you did while you were assisting these individuals. And last point, including everything I'm telling you right now, if anyone tells you that a resume rule is a rule and that there's no flexibility on it, be a little cautious with that person. There are very good best practices for resumes, but everyone's situation is so different. And I think it's really important to instead of make your own decisions about what orders things should be in, how long it should be, based on the amount of experience you have and what you've done. We'll talk about that later. Next slide, please. Really quick note on just my belief in paid internships. We heard that in my bio. There are unpaid and paid internships out there, and you'll make your own decisions about what is the best fit and the best experience for you. But I see doing this work every day that there are a lot of paid ones, and you can probably find one that is paid in your area. So if you take an unpaid internship because it's the best thing for your topic, that's one thing, but don't settle for the first unpaid one just because you got an internship. Know your worth and find one that values your work. And if you come across any programs that offer to give you placement support, housing, and professional development in exchange for you paying them, that's not always necessarily automatically something you don't need, but also, think about whether, that is something you need a service for, or, can put together some resources and do. Next slide, please. And I will paste a link into the chat as the next bio is being introduced. I have a link that I really like about how to market any international experience, how to take what you've done and share it to other people. So since I'm nearing the end of my time, I will leave the link that I'll put in the chat as how to make the most of and to market your experience. But in addition to getting the experience, you want to have the most effective time doing it. So seek out the type of work that you're looking for. I don't think you need to do extra work just to look good, but if you're not getting the type of experience you want, you can ask for it. Enjoy the city that you are in, and get to know other interns, get to know other professionals as a knowledge community. Next and possibly final slide, please. I will also paste in the chat for FIU students the link to the Talent Lab website and to my email address. This is what we run here to help students at our university do all of this, from our free DC Ready online course, our three-day flying seminars, and our Hamilton Scholars Program, where students get a scholarship and take a course together here in Washington while they intern. I look forward to speaking to any FIU students on the call about that. So I'll be pasting some stuff in the chat, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a great overview, and I'm sure exactly if there are any questions, please post them into the Q&A box, and then we'll get to cover those in a few minutes. But first, we have another interesting aspect and another interesting expert here with us, and that's Mr. Alastair Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton is the Associate Director of the Pitt, the so-called Pitt Washington Center, which is from the University of Pittsburgh. There he works as Associate Director of Alumni Relations and Career Services for the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. And he has been with the school since 2014. In this capacity, he leads Washington D.C. initiatives, engages students, alumni, employers, and other key stakeholders in Washington, D.C. He manages the school's D.C. semester programs, counsels students on their careers, assists them in their job and internship searches, and connects them to a wide range of DC employers across all sectors. So as such, I'm very happy to have you here. And please, the next 10-12 minutes are all yours.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to my colleagues Eric and Amber for all the great advice they've just given. So I'll share a little bit about our school, our DC programs, and the kind of opportunities that are available in Washington, D.C., the kind of internships that our students have done and the different career paths that they've taken. First, just share a little bit of background on me. I've been in D.C. for almost 15 years now. I went to graduate school at Boston University, earning a master's in international relations. I spent a year abroad teaching English in Seoul, South Korea after that, and then moved to DC, working in the international nonprofit space for a few years before landing in higher ed with the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. So a little bit about GSPIA. That's our school. We are one of the oldest, largest, and most comprehensive schools of public and international affairs in the United States, one of the few graduate schools that combines strong programs in domestic and international policy under one roof, really giving you the opportunity for a really diverse course of study. So GSPIA offers 3 different master's degrees. There's Public and International Affairs, Public Administration, International Development, and there's also a mid-career master's focusing on public policy and management, along with a PhD program, of course. Now, with any of those degrees, you have the opportunity to concentrate in different areas, and I'll quickly list those areas. That's energy and environment, international political economy, public and nonprofit management, urban affairs and planning, governance and international public management, non-governmental organizations and civil society, security and intelligence studies, human security, policy research and analysis, and social policy. I'll also quickly highlight the graduate certificate programs that may be of interest to you all, focusing on European areas. So you can do these programs through Pitt's University Center for International Studies, combining foreign language training, multidisciplinary courses, and community outreach for deeper understanding of specific regions. And these can be combined to fit within the 2-year master's program. So there's a Western Europe option, expanding your understanding of Western Europe by studying from a historical, economic, political, sociological, legal, and public policy perspective. There's Russian and Eastern European studies. and there's also European Union studies. We also have study abroad opportunities that you can combine with your 2-year program. I believe Paris and Madrid are currently being offered. There's others that are on hold due to COVID, but should be coming back within the next year or so. So what do we do in DC, and what do I do for the school? So I work at our Pitt, Washington Center. We're based right in downtown DC, across from the World Bank. We're steps from the White House, steps from the State Department. And I work in alumni relations, engaging our alumni on different ways to connect with the school. Often that's through volunteer opportunities with our students, engaging alums to serve on career panels, be mentors, guest speakers, give career advice, that kind of thing. I've also worked in career services, where I manage our DC semester programs and counsel students on their careers and job and internship searches. So I'll talk a little bit about those DC programs now. We have DC semester programs where students spend one of their 4 semesters in graduate school. They'll spend in Washington, D.C. Our fall program focuses on global security and development. This is a partnership with the Syracuse Maxwell School and the Corbell School at the University of Denver. The courses are taught by DC practitioners, giving you a real hands-on DC experience. Spring program is a little more public affairs focused, partnership with Pitt Law, but the same basic idea as the fall. We also offer a DC career trip where students travel from Pittsburgh to DC for a week, jam-packed with career panels, employer site visits, places like the State Department, USAID. We've gone to the EU delegation to the US in past years. Just trips across all sectors and other networking opportunities. There's also opportunities to connect with alumni through virtual panels and speakers, information sessions throughout the year. We've got a really vast alumni network in DC. It's our 2nd biggest cluster of alums outside of Pittsburgh, just working in all sectors. So what you're probably most interested in is what are our students doing? What kind of internships? What kind of career paths that connect with Europe and the EU? So with such a broad range of degrees, we do have a lot of students with a broad range of interest. But I'll try and focus on some of those, many of which my colleagues have already mentioned. But federal internships are obviously very popular. We've had students intern at the Department of Treasury, the Department of State, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the U.S. Commercial Service, USAID, other think tanks that deal with European issues, the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, the Wilson Center, the Stimson Center, the Hudson Institute, the Atlantic Council, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the German Marshall Fund, the Center for Transatlantic Relations. There's other nonprofits like the U.S.-Russia Foundation, the World Affairs Council, international organizations like the UNDP, the International Organization for Migration. And for those of you who might be security focused, there's obviously intelligence internships as well, and organizations like the Women in International Security and the National Defense University. Different career paths. There's obviously a lot of different options there. The federal government, as my colleagues have mentioned, this is a popular path, although one that can be challenging to get your foot in the door. I would highly recommend the Presidential Management Fellows Program. This is the PMF program, is a competitive 2-year leadership professional development program where you apply for positions that are only open to PMF finalists with different agencies that then turn into a permanent position. You are only eligible to apply for this program in your 2nd year of graduate school and then the 2 years after you graduate as well. So it's not the only way to get your foot in the door, but it is a great way, and we hear that time and time again from our alumni. Obviously, the State Department, I can't recommend the Pathways internships enough. We've had many students go that route and really get great experiences. The U.S. Government Accountability Office. This is an agency that many of our students know nothing about when they arrive at GSPIA, but we have had many recent graduates get their first jobs there, some internships that have turned into permanent positions, but others who have just entered at the analyst level and gone through their professional development program, and they all really sing the praises of GAO. But I think, the other point I wanted to make with regards to the federal government was just many students have their hearts set on, the famous places like State Department and USAID, when there are so many other opportunities available at lesser known agencies. So really, really do your research and find out what those opportunities are. I was just speaking with an alum who was loving his position at the Foreign Agricultural Service, really doing cool work focused on trade that you may not have known about. There's the International Trade Administration at the U.S. Department of Commerce, another place where we have a few GSPIA alums doing really important work. Obviously, the Department of Treasury, there's just so many others. If you're interested in intelligence, again, obviously everyone's heard of CIA and DIA, but there are many other government agencies doing intelligence work and other lesser known intelligence agencies as well. So it's really important to do that research and cast a wide net, as Eric said before. I also want to mention the private sector route. I think about 25% of our alums go into the private sector. Consulting and government contracting is a huge industry in DC, and it's a really good way to get your foot in the door, especially if you do want to eventually end up in the federal government. You can get a security clearance this way, which can be a barrier for some people, and is an arduous, challenging process. But working for a government contractor, you're often doing a lot of the same work as government employees, and you're probably even getting paid a little bit more. So there's really a lot of advantages to pursuing consulting and government contracting. Also mention embassies. Obviously, there's hundreds of embassies in DC which are looking for local hires. I was just speaking with an alum this week who started his career in DC working for the British Embassy's Commonwealth and Development Office, and he's then moved on to the Center for International Private Enterprise and then the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. So that's just an example of one path. So definitely keep an eye out for opportunities at embassies. As far as sort of the lobbying path, I think what we see with our graduates is often starting their career on Capitol Hill, working for a representative's office or a senator or a committee, getting that legislative experience, really understanding how the legislative process works, and then after a few years being able to shift into the private sector and working in government relations and lobbying. And then, of course, the nonprofits, NGOs, and think tanks world. There's literally thousands of those in DC, focused on every regional area, any kind of area of interest you might have. There are nonprofits, there are think tanks that are focusing on that. And it's just a matter of doing the research and finding the opportunities. So I'll end by just saying, the opportunities are here in Washington, particularly dealing with Europe and the EU. My best advice I can give you all is to just take advantage of the opportunities you have while in undergrad, while in grad school. Start developing skills, gain that valuable experience through internships, through research centers and working groups, and really take advantages of your university's DC programs, and go to a graduate school that offers those DC programs. Because if you want to start a career in DC, it really is a no-brainer to take advantage of what your school is offering, and then network. As my colleagues have said, it's so important to make those important connections and contacts that you're going to need for the job search. So I'll stop there and kick it back over to Markus.
Great, thank you so much. I think you all had nice complementary perspectives on careers, European-focused careers in Europe. And we have about 30 minutes for question and answers. There are already 2 coming in, which I'll post in a second. Please keep them coming, everyone. I have one question that I want to just open up with, directed to all three of you, and want to hear sort of your feedback a little bit from my own experiences as somebody who tries to mentor, you know, undergraduate and graduate students here at FIU. And so this is, I think you talked already a lot about sort of how to best prepare, right? And my question was also like, when should undergraduate student or graduate student, if they do a master or PhD, right? When should they start preparing? Because what I often see is that they show up in my office when they're about to graduate, and I basically tell them, you know, that's a little late. You basically need to get the ball rolling right half a year ago, or particular network building. That takes a lot of time. So can you say something about when they should prepare? And then we'll go to your questions, the other questions that are in the question and chat box.
Yeah, I can jump in first. I mean, I would say it's never too early. Obviously, you want to be networking for your internship searches, you know, and really connecting with your school's alumni. Especially if you're interested in federal government opportunities, you know, those are long application processes that involve background checks. So it's really never too early to start looking and just get an idea of what the timelines are at different organizations, and when those application deadlines are coming up, and you know, as my colleagues have said, reaching out to, you know, to alumni of your school or people working at organizations, agencies that you're interested in, and learning about their jobs and learning about their career paths. So yeah, I don't have an exact month, but definitely not waiting until graduation. It's really once you're in graduate school, or, you know, in the midst of your undergrad experience, it's really never too early to start thinking about what that next step is going to look like for you.
Oh, that basically stole everything I was going to say. I was also going to say it's never too early. And I think one thing I had a lot during both undergrad and grad school was kind of imposter syndrome, that I had to know exactly what I wanted to say and why I wanted to reach out to, you know, an alumni from or working at the State Department or something. And I think sometimes I got caught up in, well, I don't really have anything, you know, special or important to say, so should I meet with them? And the answer is absolutely yes. Besides, you know, a time like now with Ukraine and Russia, if you reach out to someone at the State Department, they might be a little busy, your email might fall through the cracks. But generally, I would say people are more than willing to take a coffee with you, do a virtual meeting. We're all here to help each other out. So never too early, but definitely a few months before graduation. And then the summer is a great time, especially if you're looking at DC. Things slow down in August. People are more willing to have a coffee or meet you somewhere. So just keep in mind that there's never a bad time. And then there are also strategic times in DC where people are less busy, like that August recess, that you might want to target to set up some networking meetings.
Before adding a very quick comment, I just want to show off, because Alastair was going on and on about them, my Government Accountability Office keychain. One of my favorite agencies, and we've had a lot of great interns there as well. Agreeing with both panelists, but adding just the personal experience of for 3 years and change now, I've been in this role helping our students and alumni get DC roles. For people who are seeking full-time jobs, I would much rather be working with a graduating undergrad senior who has done an internship than I would working for somebody who just finished their master's degree and has not done an internship. Category A, you know, 100% of the time when the person's dedicated to that career search, I see them land something. And category B becomes a little more difficult without having the networks and the work experience that are built through an internship. So I won't pre-answer one of the questions in the chat. There are obviously exceptions for that, and people do have work experience, but with that, you know, the internships are important. So that's why I agree with my previous two panelists to, you know, not wait till the last minute to do them. But even if you do wait till the last minute, still do them because a lot of internships are open to recent grads as well. And so for people who did wait till the last minute, I do recommend applying to full-time jobs, because you can, but also apply to internships too.
Great, thank you very much for your insights. So let's go through, there are a couple of questions already in the chat box. Let's go by them one by one. Mackenzie Hansen asked, what does it look like to be a content specialist? I'm not sure if one of you were referring specifically to, is it social media content creator, or is it sort of research area content specialist? Is anyone familiar with content specialist as a sort of professional term? If not, Mackenzie, maybe you can specify that, and then we'll get to the next question. Oh, Amber, you want to say something?
No, I was just trying to think if any of the panelists use the term content specialist. But I think a lot of what we do is really experiential learning and learning from others. And so a lot of being in DC, at least in my end, from being a content specialist as far as federal agencies, it really goes back to having conversations with people at agencies on the ground and kind of grooming your content that way rather than just reading a congressionally research service report or something like that. But I'm not sure if that was the question. So,
thank you. If there are no other additions, then let's go to the question by Dante Parker. Dante asks, says that he's a grad student majoring in IR at FIU, and assuming that a person gets accepted into an internship, are there ways to leverage your financial position, regardless of if the internship is paid or unpaid?
Since Dante's an FIU student, I'm going to take FIU privilege to go first and say that I think the first thing we try to do is get a paid internship, and one that pays well. I do see a good number of internships that pay $15 an hour and even more, even in these policy spaces. So that might not be the case for everyone, but if you get an internship that pays a decent amount of money, that's a good starting point. I will say that for FIU students who get a DC internship, whether it is unpaid or paid but not paid enough, we do have a Make a Difference DC Scholarship Fund that can assist with that. So that's why it's really vital that anyone that is actively searching and applying for DC internships is working with me and my team, because of course we send out information about that. But if we don't know that you're doing a DC internship search, even if you're already working with our Career and Talent Development Office or other units at the university who are also doing a very good job helping you, we want to know about it too. So that way we can loop you into some of those resources that are specific to us. And I'm sure there are plenty of other scholarships out there as well. Some of the other panelists might know about some. On the Talent Lab website that I linked to earlier, the internships page does have a link to external scholarships for DC interns as well, which would be open to students from other universities as well. I'm gonna put my email in the chat one more time for other FIU students who do want to let me know that they're seeking a DC internship.
And then just one thing anecdotally, when I was in undergrad, I would apply to a lot of unpaid internships, thinking that once I got the internship and they met me, like, oh, of course, they'll give me a stipend or we'll be able to work something out. But generally, if it's publicized as an unpaid internship, it's hard to change their mind. Internships are usually budgeted by the firm or organization. So be sure if a paid internship is something that you feel like you need, look for those and at least learn from my experience of I spent so much time on applications to unpaid internships thinking that there was some loophole. And a lot of times there's not. I think more to Eric's point, there are more resources, but I wouldn't go into it thinking you could change an organization's, budgetary future or things like that. And I was a little naive in trying to do that for some nonprofits I was interested in.
Yeah, I would just echo what Amber and Eric said. Unfortunately, you're for an internship offer, you're not really in a position to be able to negotiate salary. Certainly, if it's a full-time position, you should absolutely do your research and negotiate what you think you're worth. But as far as internships go, it kind of is, the pay is what it is, and they should all be paid. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. So definitely pursue, all kinds of grants, opportunities that your school offers. And I know that's something that the University of Pittsburgh does, providing support for students to do unpaid internships. So certainly explore those opportunities.
Thank you all. No, the next two questions in the chat box, I think, relate somewhat. So I'm going to ask them together. Gildas de Rubio says, that they returned to school during the pandemic after being a professional for 10 years. So are internships still a must? While Sylvia Roper is a UNC alum finishing the master's in global history, is highly educated, but only has administrative and teaching experience, and as if entry-level positions would be the best choice. So can you maybe say something more about sort of entry-level versus mid-level career professionals that want to get the foot in the door, so to speak?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take a first shot. As far as the first question about are internships a must, it's not a great answer. It really depends on what your professional experience was before going back to school in the pandemic. As far as applying for full-time jobs, they're going to see that you have some experience that relate to the job you're applying for. So while internships would definitely showcase that, if you have relevant experience, whether it's you had some PR background or marketing, and then you pair that with whatever you're doing your master's in, and they complement each other, then I would say internships aren't necessarily a must. But if you did a total 180 on your career path, it might be worth looking into some type of internships, or at least something to bridge the gap while you're looking for a more fulfilling full-time job.
Yeah, I would say that I would, for someone with work experience of that nature, that they're not a must, but you could. It's really only up to you whether it's feasible for you or not. I know when in 2019, we had a 2014 FIU grad who did a congressional internship because it was one of these 180 career switches that Amber is talking about, and she still it works in and is getting promoted within her congressional office to this day. So you could, but I would generally say that you don't need to. I think that internships offer two things. One is work experience, which is something that somebody with work experience has, and even if it's not highly relevant, if it's not a total 180, I mean, an internship is probably providing administrative and entry-level work experience, which is what you do have. But the other thing is the networking. I don't think the students are getting the jobs after an internship because of the work experience as much as, or at least equal to, the fact that they're meeting people doing that. So I went back to all these networking tips in my presentation. You could do those things as well, and should.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would say, it doesn't hurt. While you may be able to, get an intern, waive out of the internship requirement with your prior experience, it certainly doesn't hurt to add, an additional experience to your resume. And I guess as far as the second part of your question with whether to shoot for entry level or mid level, I mean, I think what I advise students is you always want to shoot higher. It probably doesn't hurt to apply for both entry level and mid level. You can always turn down a job if it doesn't seem to be the right fit for you. But certainly, if you have some of the jobs requirements, but not all of them, you should still apply, because sometimes those are preferred rather than required, and they may decide that you're the right fit for the job. So definitely don't sell yourself short when looking at the right jobs to apply for.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that for Sylvia's question, it's more, why does the position, whether it's an internship or entry-level job, interest you rather than what level it is? Because you don't know what they're really looking for. They might be looking for the exact expertise that you've had through all of your education versus work experience. So really casting a wide net, really depending on what you're interested in versus, oh, I think that level might be a little too high for me, I'm not going to apply. One thing that actually worked the reverse way for me is, while I was at the Bertelsmann Foundation, I found out about my current firm, Lewis-Burke Associates, and I applied for the internship because I still didn't have, that tangible work experience. I had quite a few internships, but I was a little nervous about applying for a full-time job. So I reached out to their internship coordinator, and on that call, they said, we think we need to bring you on as a research assistant. Is that okay with you? Do you want to skip the internship and just interview for a full-time position? And so that's how I got my current job, because I wasn't crossing anything out. I knew I was interested in the government relations firm, and applying for the internship actually landed me a full-time job. So just a little story about me.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Now, I think before we get to the next two questions, which are slightly more specific about sort of what folks can do with specific backgrounds, I want to introduce there another aspect that's related to those two questions, and that has to do less with sort of at what stage you're going to try to get to DC when pursuing a career, but also sort of what about the degrees needed, right? And also, you know, how much do you need to become a content expert or subject expert, as opposed to be flexible enough to apply to a number of positions, right? That's obviously a difficult determination to make. And obviously nobody should state that they're expert in something that they aren't. But maybe you, from your experience, can say a little something about sort of to what extent, you know, do you need to be a subject expert and need to be at the same time remain flexible enough to catch a wide net or to spread a wide net? Anyone wants to take a shot at it?
I don't think it's bad to be an expert in something if you're interested in something, because I think you could catch both things with that. If you are an expert in one thing, then you're qualified for things that require expertise in that one thing. But I think you'd still be qualified for all the other things that somebody who's pretty general would be able to do. So I think it's great to have a topic that you love enough to be an expert in. I wouldn't advise anyone against that. But for someone who does not have that expertise, I would consider myself one of those people. That's why I like my job with FiU in DC, because I get to work on programs and work with interns that deal with everything from national security to health equity to environmental sustainability to all of the above, because I find things generally interesting. And I think DC is a great city for people that are like that as well, because often it is about your knowledge of kind of how government and policy works and moves. And if you know how Congress, if you know how congressional committees work and how laws are passed and how the politics of different regions of the country influence who gets into the seats who make the laws, and you can really be marketable to anywhere that deals with that kind of stuff, like Amber's organization does, and learn the content expertise of that secondhand.
Fantastic, thanks.
Yeah, I can jump in too. I mean, yeah, I think I would echo what Eric said. I think if you're passionate about, you know, a certain area or subject, and you know that that's what you want to work on, then that's great, and you should pursue those opportunities. But I think there's also lots and lots of opportunities in DC for generalists, where they're looking for somebody, you know, just with the right skills, with the right background, you know, that they can train, you know, to become an expert in whatever they're doing. So I think it really does depend, and there's not really one right answer.
And you have to be a quick learner, obviously, right, when you do that. Thank you. Catherine Maldonado, she has a question for Alastair Hamilton. She said she studied IR in South Korea and wanted to pursue a career that would pertain to South Korea's relation with the EU or the US. So do you happen to know anything, any job prospects, internship, entry level that would work in that direction?
I mean, nothing specific, but I mean, there are many think tanks. You know, I know there's a U.S. Korea Institute that's housed at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced and International Studies. You know, there's many of those types of organizations. Obviously, the Korean embassy has, I see job opportunities at the South Korean embassy from time to time as well. There are certainly opportunities in DC that relate to U.S. Korea relations. I don't know about any EU Korea relations, you know, off the top of my head, but those may exist too. So, you know, I would definitely pursue the nonprofit, you know, think tank angle. I'm sure there are federal government, you know, opportunities as well. So they certainly exist, but have to do a little research to find out on specific openings.
Great, thank you. Next, RGR o24@outlook.com, I don't have your name, sorry, says that they graduated from FIU 2018, also majored in international relations. Is it too late to do an internship? Minor in political science, certificate in national security studies. I don't know, Eric, if you want to maybe.
Not necessarily. Every organization has their own rules. Some are for current students, some are for recent graduates up into a certain time. But I even see some organizations that their internships don't even require that a person is or ever was a student. They are just temporary jobs that are built the same way with the, with a lot of professional development. And I think that's actually really cool, because as much as I love higher ed and I work for a university, I don't think that everyone should have to go to college in order to have a fulfilling career. So I love when organizations are open to that. So no, it's not necessarily too late. But to restate something I said earlier, I think someone who does have their degree should be applying for full-time jobs and paid internships at the same time, because you might get one or the other first and you're qualified for both. But even alumni can reach out to me. So feel free to email me and we can take a look at your resume, chat a little more about your specific career interests and try to find some options.
Fantastic, thank you. And then Gilda asked, are there specific recommendations in terms of any organizations from federal to IOs, international organizations, for holders of binational, that meaning they have both US and European citizenships? So I would definitely highlight that probably, right, in a cover letter, because it makes you more attractive, but maybe you have some specific insights on that.
I mean, I think it opens you up to having possibilities also in Europe. A lot of times where, at least if you just have US citizenship, you're limited to what especially paid jobs you can have overseas. And so I think it allows you to actually figure out what location you want to be in. And if it is in the EU, you would be able to work in a satellite office or an organization based there versus, at least for me, I knew I was looking in the US just because the visa process and a work visa, while it's possible, that's very difficult for a lot of, especially nonprofits and things that I was interested in. So I think you can highlight that, use that. And once you kind of figure out what you want to do and maybe where you want to be, that's definitely something you can use to your advantage. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, and with regards to sort of, the EU aspect or the EU citizenship aspect, there's, Gilda, if you have European citizenship, that opens also the opportunity for you, as was just being said, to have, for example, an internship with the European Commission, right? They're the Blue Book internships. They are very competitive and you have to go through this sort of what they call a concours, competition to get in. The European Union delegation, of course, also has traineeships and internships. Many of them are open for US citizens only for US citizens, but there are also that are specifically for EU citizens. So definitely that would give you, I would think that would give you sort of an additional advantage, right? Good. Right now we don't have any open questions. We have about, 5 to 7 minutes left. So if there are no other questions coming in, I want to ask you a quick question that has to do sort of with the reason why you are all in Washington, D.C. And that is, of course, the current administration of the day, right? And sometimes what I hear on campus is that, I'm not sure that I want to work in D.C. because of administration X, Y, and Z. Now, if you're working sort of on a Europe-focused job, but then you're still working in the US government, to what extent does it really matter, right? What administration you would be working for?
Yeah, I could jump in. I think obviously if you're working on Capitol Hill, then like party affiliation matters, of course. But most of the federal agencies, these are nonpartisan, career workers who have worked through Republican administrations, have worked through Democratic administrations, and obviously they may have a preference as to what their job is like under different administrations, but that's not really why they do it. They do it to for a belief in public service and to better serve the country. And I think it really doesn't doesn't make a big difference. Obviously, I think there are jobs and there are areas where it would, but you know, DC is also, you know, it's a big city where a lot of people don't work in politics or even in the federal government, where it would have even less of an impact in that case. So, you know, I would also say that, you know, 4 years is a short amount of time, and you know, administrations change, and if you're interested in a career in DC, you know, I wouldn't necessarily let whoever's in charge at that point in time affect your decision to pursue that career.
Great.
Yeah, I completely agree that you shouldn't let the administration sway you, unless, I think, like Alastair said, if you're working for a member of Congress or want to work in the administration where it is inherently political. Besides that, DC is really a machine that has to keep running, usually does, besides a casual government shutdown every now and then. And there has to be people that are on the ground working on policy, no matter if what side the administration is on. One thing that my firm is we're nonpartisan. We work with universities across the US that come from red states, blue states, have different friends and members of Congress. And actually during the administration change, a lot of them looked to us to say, okay, what's going to change? What can we expect to be different for research? And so while some things change, sometimes jobs offer an opportunity to be a resource during those more tumultuous times. And so it was actually really steady for us because people look to us to see what was the future direction with administration change.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, it is 3:10. Technically, we have a few more minutes left, but I also want to make sure that people fill out a survey I just put it into the chat box, and you can also access the survey here through our website slide. If you focus your smartphone on it, you'll get the link directly. If there's nothing else that you want to add, I don't know, any final words from any of you? One last final tip that you want to give our audience before we leave you.
I just think it's never too late to network and reach out, use your alumni network, find things that you're interested in, and feel okay sending those cold emails. It might be a little intimidating at times, but a lot of, especially DC, comes down to who you know, or if you've kind of stuck your neck out there. So I would encourage you, if you're on the fence about something, pursue it and see if it can go your way.
Great, thank you.
The DC area is a beautiful place to live, and regardless of any of the specific kind of career-oriented advice, if you're looking for a city other than your current one to live in, I recommend it.
Yeah, I echo all of that. You know, take advantage of your career centers, take advantage of your Washington D.C. programs, you know, and bet on yourself. You know, really pursue the career that you want, and put in the time and effort to make it happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You were all wonderful experts. I think, you know, I learned a lot. I'm sure our student audience learned a lot as well. I appreciate everyone who logged in today at this somewhat somber day. It was good to focus on something constructive and quite interesting. I want to thank you very much for your time, your expertise, and I'm sure that if folks have any questions, that they can reach out to you and you would be happy to help them, right? So thank you very much for that. With that, one last thing, please do fill out the survey if you haven't reached out for the link yet that we posted. And just to let you know that we have our next career panel on Thursday, April 21st, same time, 2 to 3:15. And there we have a student experience panel where we have, you know, extra students that had internships or entry-level jobs, and they report back with their experience. But with that, thank you very much again for your wonderful expertise, dear panelists and everyone. And I hope you have a good rest of the week. Thank you and goodbye. Take care.